Hello, this is Felicia Moore, your host of Realty Resources and Realities. This is February, Black History Month. Let's talk about roots and reality. 10 Black history facts you need to know. Hello, this is Felicia Moore. Thank you for joining us for our now February Black History Month edition of Realty Resources and Realities. Again, I'm adding my information at the bottom, Ask Felicia at exitwestmidtown.com. Please invite me to your groups. I'd love to come and talk about some things that you need to know now to protect your property. I'm really important about that. And as you see with our Black History Month, you will see how people had to fight to be able to even own a piece of real estate and to keep it from being stolen from them. So we don't want that to happen now. So please invite me to your groups. If you have topics in which you would like for me to discuss on the show, I'd love to hear that, or just your feedback, or if you have questions related to real estate, that's Ask Felicia at exitwestmidtown.com, and you can text also Ask Felicia to 85377. So let's get started with the show. The first tip I want to talk about is 1866. We've got to go back in history. That was the Freedmen's Bureau established. The Freedmen's Bureau was established. And you say, what is that? Well, the Freedmen's Bureau was created to assist formerly enslaved people after the Civil War. So after the Civil War, after there was freedom, there was this bureau, Freedmen's Bureau, to assist them. Now, what this bureau did was it helped secure housing and land for African Americans through though many faced legal and violent resistance from white landowners. And just imagine you are enslaved, you were freed, and you may have issues related to real estate. Some enslaved people were actually granted land from their masters. Some people paid for it themselves. They were able to save whatever they could do to get money. And so a lot of them had disputes, and particularly you're just right out of freedom. Now you're having to fight and have someone to help you. And that's what the Freedmen's Bureau did, that was established in 1866. Another fact, number 2, is in 1910, the Ocoee Massacre, Ocoee, Florida. African Americans who owned property and attempted to vote were faced with violent attacks. And there are so many of these attacks that had happened, even right here in the state of Georgia. There are many that have happened where Blacks or African Americans face a lot of resistance. Many were killed, and survivors were forced to flee, abandoning their homes and land. And there are so many examples where land was just taken from Blacks from massacres and riots, and they were forced to flee. And then when you find out, like even here in the state of Georgia, in Forsyth County, they were forced to flee their land. And then records would show how the land that was owned to Blacks or African Americans were later sold by other people of other races, particularly white people, and continue to be sold. So the land was just stolen or taken from them. Fact number 3 I want to talk about is in 1917, the Buchanan versus Warley Supreme Court case. Very important. Buchanan versus Warley Supreme Court case. The United States Supreme Court struck down a Louisville, Kentucky ordinance that enforced racial segregation in housing, ruling that it violated property rights under the Fourth Amendment. So in Louisville, Kentucky, there was an ordinance that said basically blacks could live in one area, whites could live in one area, and that this Supreme Court struck it down and said that it violated property rights under the 14th Amendment. So you will see over time that many of these injustices that were done to blacks and African Americans during previous times are the precursor and the motivation and the reason why we have fair housing laws now, because land was taken away, rights were taken away, and they were forced to be treated differently than their counterparts. So now I want to talk about number 4 for today. In our part 1, we're going to do 5, and then we'll do the other 5 in part 2. And this is the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Some of these massacres we are well known and we've heard about. This one may be one that you have heard about, but there's so many of them that took place across this country, north and south, that we do not know about. And perhaps in future years during Black History Month, we'll explore some of those as well. But the Tulsa Race Massacre is also known as Black Wall Street. And many people have heard of Black Wall Street. As a matter of fact, there is a Black Wall Street project in Stonecrest, Georgia, here that sort of gives homage to Black Wall Street. Most of Black Wall Street does not exist today. There are some buildings that are still there that they look to say that this was a part of the massive Black Wall Street. Understanding that in history, because of segregation, because of racism, because blacks were always under attack, what blacks did were to pull their resources together and have their own places where they could feel comfortable and spend their money. Here in Atlanta, Georgia, it was the Sweet Auburn district. And Black Wall Street was Black Wall Street. And these took place across the country where you can go to your own barber, your own banker, your own life insurance company, your own doctors, your own places. And it was in terms of Black people, your place where you can go and feel comfortable and spend your dollars. And unfortunately, they were so successful that they were being destroyed. So the Tulsa Race Massacre, known as Black Wall Street, is Tulsa Greenwoods District, was a thriving Black community with numerous homeowners. The district was destroyed in one of the worst incidents of racial violence in U.S. history. And thousands of African Americans lost their homes and businesses. And that happened here in the United States. And again, this was replicated time and time again across this country. Number 5. Number 5 is interesting because this also is a precursor to many laws that we have on the books today and are still having to fight these issues. Yes, still in 2025, still having to fight these issues. And that was in the 1930s. Redlining is when redlining began. Some of you may have heard of redlining, some of you may not. But the Federal Housing Administration and Homeowners Loan Corporation developed maps that systematically denied loans to Black communities. So it was redlined, and they would say this is where you should not loan money. And these were typically and most notably Black neighborhoods where they could not and would not loan money. The practice was known as redlining, and this institutionalized housing segregation and wealth disparities. That was the beginning of the end. This is where many of the areas were put in areas where they couldn't get resources. So you wonder in some Black communities, after they destroyed them in the early 1900s, but there were areas that couldn't get resources to build grocery stores, to build a nice housing, and they became slums and they became ghettos. And if they were owned by Black people, they weren't able to get those loans first of all to buy the house, but if they were able to buy it, to keep it up. So redlining was the beginning of the end to a lot of our wealth disparities. Not the end, but the beginning of that. And it segregated people not only by race, but that also had the effect of dealing with segregating people by income. So this is part one of two parts that I will do. So you can catch this next week, the next episode on Thursday, where we will talk about 5 other very significant things that happened with real estate in Black history. But I want to end part one on a good note and on a personal note. And how I got into real estate was through my grandfather. And my grandfather at the time, he moved from Sipsey, Alabama. This was the Great Migration when Blacks moved north. And my dad, of course, being his child, came with him. They settled in Indianapolis. Many went to places like Chicago, Detroit, Michigan, and others. They got factory jobs and were able to work. My father basically was run out of Sipsey, Alabama, because being there was the sharecropping and the tenant farming thing, and he was educated, had gone to school and got educated, and they were not going to have any educated Black people around there, so they kind of gave him an ultimatum, and he took his family, brought them north, again started in these factories working there, but then eventually he worked and got himself a broker's license to sell real estate. And he was one of very few in the Indianapolis, Indiana area who did that and opened his own brokerage. They had challenges, of course, then even getting licenses, but getting them and being able to work for and with the African American community and making sure they got the best deals that they could do without being redlined, without being cheated. And he did it in a very challenging time. And so he's my hero in Black history. And as his granddaughter, I saw him doing this, and I got my license as well. And so I had one in Indiana. And then when I moved here to Georgia in 2000, so I've had my license now going on 25 years in the state of Georgia and a couple of years in Indianapolis. I got my license here as well. So anyway, we're here to serve you at Exit Realty West Midtown. And we will be back at our next show and delve into part 2 for Black History Facts, Roots and Reality, 10 Black History Facts about real estate you need to know. Talk to you soon. Oh, before I leave, let me put this up. You can certainly send me show ideas. This show idea came from my broker of record, Michael Williams. But I would love your show ideas. I'd love to come and speak to you and your group about how to protect your property. And I'm here just as a resource. If you just have a real estate question, you or someone you know, feel free to reach out to me and I will reach back to you. So having that, I will also end with our information so that you can contact us on and reach us in many mediums. I will see you again at the next show. And this is Realty Resources and Reality with Felicia Moore. Have a great day.